there's a good chance you're dealing with a middleman, like me, when you get your medicines. That's because PBMs and insurers are often the same company. We even own big chain pharmacies and are buying your doctor's office. We decide what medicines you can get, where you get them, and how much you pay. It's a win-win. For me.
When middlemen own it all, you lose. Visit phrma.org/middlemen to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
Don't miss your chance to spring into deals at Lowe's. Right now, get a free 60-volt Toro battery when you purchase a select 60-volt Toro electric mower. Plus, buy 3 19.3-ounce vegetable and herb Bonnie plants for just $10. It's time to give your yard a grow-up. Lowe's. We help. You save. Valid through 4/23. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Discount taken at time of purchase. Actual plant size and selection varies by location. Excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
I come from a big family of lawyers. My late grandfather, when he came home from the Army after World War II, he used the GI Bill to get a free law degree from St. John's University here in Queens, New York. My dad's a lawyer at a big firm. 2 of my brothers are lawyers. I'm married to a lawyer. All to say, my experience with lawyers is that they tend not to give up. They really don't like to let things go. Which is why it's kind of surprising to me that the Trump administration has been so successful at pushing around some of our country's most prominent lawyers. These are the law firms collectively known simply as Big Law.
The top 20, 25 law firms in the country.
That's Ankush Khardori, a former federal prosecutor at the DOJ. Before that, a former Big Law attorney. Now, he's a senior writer at Politico magazine.
These really, really large law firms, mostly based in New York and D.C., with offices all over the country and sometimes all over the world, sort of these large 1,000-plus attorney firms.
In the months since Donald Trump began his second term, Big Law has found itself in his crosshairs. And now?
I did not foresee anything like this series of executive orders, much less the settlements that have now emerged in their wake.
These executive orders started coming in soon after Trump's inauguration. In late February, he began revoking security clearances for Covington and Burling, a firm that gave free legal services to former special prosecutor Jack Smith. When he signed the order, Trump made no secret about his motivations.
Hold it. This is a good one. Is everybody listening? Deranged Jack Smith. We're going to call it the Deranged Jack Smith signing or bill. Go ahead.
One law firm that provided pro bono legal services to the special counsel's office under Jack Smith's leadership was Covington and Burling.
And that was just the start. In the months since, Trump has issued executive orders against some of the biggest firms in the country. While a handful of these firms are fighting Trump's executive orders in court, at least 9 of them have made deals with the president. In an effort to try to get Trump to back off, these firms have promised to spend money on free legal work, that's pro bono, as they say, for issues that were supposed to be of mutual interest between Big Law and the White House. But over the past week, Trump has hinted that he sees this collective $1 billion pot as more of a personal legal fund. Would it surprise you if, say, a year from now, you saw your former law firm, Paul Weiss, working on behalf of, say, the coal industry, or if you saw Skadden defending various Trump officials in court?
You know, several weeks ago, that would have been a pretty unthinkable proposition, having these firms being put directly to use on Trump's behalf to further his interests. But over the last week, that has shifted a little bit. And I think that possibility has sort of moved into the realm of something we may actually see.
Would you say that you're a Star Wars guy, Ankush?
I like the original trilogy, and I'll leave it there.
So this might be a little on the nose, but I can't stop thinking about this one scene from Empire Strikes Back. Lando Calrissian, he's running this independent city. It's called Cloud City. It's this for-profit business place. It's not political. He's interested in making money. He's not interested in rebels or empire. And at one point, Luke Skywalker and the gang, they head to Cloud City to hide out. And of course, Darth Vader shows up. He demands that Lando Calrissian hand over his friends.
Calrissian, take the princess and the Wookiee to my ship.
And Lando's like, we had a deal. And then Vader just goes like, without even looking back,
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Right? Like, this whole thing just feels like a huge shakedown to me, is it not?
I mean, functionally, certainly it is. And even the structure of these settlements, and I kind of don't even like calling them settlements, to be honest, but even the structure of these deals legally resemble a shakedown. And in that respect, I'm talking about words like extortion and bribery under federal criminal law. Now, obviously, nobody's going to get prosecuted over this because it's Trump at the helm of this, but your intuition is correct, and it actually does have some real grounding in federal law. It's not just, I think, a colloquialism in this context.
Today on the show, how big law got itself into some big trouble. I'm Rob Gunther, sitting in for Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. Do you find yourself eating the same thing over and over again? Home Chef is here to make cooking a new dish something to look forward to. At my house, we've got 2 working parents, we've got 3 young kids. Home Chef keeps things interesting. These are dishes that even my kids get excited about. Home Chef has everything you and your family need for hassle-free, delicious dinners. They cater to a variety of dietary needs. Users of leading meal kits have rated Home Chef #1 in quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. So let Home Chef deliver fresh ingredients and chef-designed recipes conveniently to your doorstep. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering What Next listeners 50% off and free shipping for your first box, plus free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/whatnext. That's homechef.com/whatnext for 50% off your first box and free dessert for life. homechef.com/whatnext. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
This episode is brought to you by Quint. Vacation season is nearly upon us. This year, it is time to treat yourself to the upgrades you deserve with Quint's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices. This spring, I am headed to Texas, where it's going to be way hotter than it is here in New York. Obviously, I needed some fresh clothes that would fit in a very tiny suitcase. Quint delivered. They sent me a wrap dress that has been following me all over the internet for the last year or so. It arrived super fast, it fit like a glove, and it's soon going to be getting some Rio Grande sunshine. You know what, though? If I'd needed a suitcase, Quint could have sent me that too. They have carry-on bags for adults, backpacks for kids, all at affordable prices for you. 50 to 80% less than similar brands. So head to Quint's, where you can buy a new outfit for summer and a bag to pack it in when you head off to enjoy. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quint's. Go to quince.com/whatnext for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/whatnext to get free shipping and 365-day returns. quince.com/whatnext.
Walk me through how we got to this point. When did Trump start targeting big law?
So several weeks ago, probably about a month ago at this point, Trump issued a series of executive orders targeting at first Covington and Burling, and then Perkins Coie. And those executive orders did several things. One, they purported to revoke the security clearances of any attorneys who held security clearances at those firms. 2, purported to prohibit the lawyers at those firms from entering federal property, which would include not just federal offices, but federal courthouses. And 3, questioned whether the firm's clients' contracts with the government might also be in jeopardy as a result of those clients' relationship with the firms. So those were sort of the 3 principal sanctions that Trump imposed in those orders. And then we've had a larger number of firms, beginning with Paul Weiss, entering into these deals with Trump to get out from under the executive orders or to preempt executive orders that may have targeted them.
So Trump is issuing these orders. Why is he issuing these orders? What are the specific charges against these firms? And how does he justify or explain them?
So this is a very good question because it's not altogether clear, but let's start with what he's saying. What they have said is that these firms have been undermining the government by litigating against them in various ways. They have criticized the firm's DEI commitments, which were never very strong to begin with. I think that one's a very obvious pretext. So those have been like among the criticisms that they've publicly levied. But, in the first series of executive orders, you could discern a pattern, which was that the firms that he had targeted either had worked for the Democratic Party or an affiliate, or hired or at one point employed partners who had worked on either a Trump prosecution or investigation. So, for instance, Wilmer Hale had Robert Mueller. Jenner and Block, which was also targeted, had Andrew Weissman, who was a deputy to Robert Mueller. Paul Weiss had Mark Pomerantz, who worked for a while on the Manhattan DA's investigation into Trump. And Perkins Coie, of course, represented the Democratic Party throughout the 2016 election. And they eventually engaged on behalf of the party, or picked up the engagement of Fusion GPS, which was the sort of I don't know what you really call it, sort of opposition research outfit type thing that...
can we say the P-tape at this point? That's what this whole thing was, right?
Yeah, that spun up the Steele dossier and the P-tape allegations. So,
it's all personal for Trump, right? This is all grounded in his personal beefs.
He has been upset about the 2016 election since 2016. Clearly, they tried and failed to prosecute one of the lawyers at Perkins Coie. But since then, it's become less obvious what the connection is. And I think... It just seems to be that the Trump administration and the people in the White House have this very broad antipathy toward what they perceive as big law or white-collar law firms. And in part, it seems to be because they feel like these firms did not welcome Trump administration officials after the first term, which is not exactly a very high-minded rationale.
When these deals were first starting to be made, what was the general understanding about what was being agreed to? Because to me, it sounded like, okay, we'll do a bunch of free pro bono work. But now it seems like the expectations might be a little different on both sides.
Right. So, yes, initially, sort of the first real inkling we got was in the form of Trump sending out through Truth Social a set of terms that he had purportedly agreed upon with Brad Karp in order to get out from under the executive order that had targeted Paul Weiss.
Brad Karp is the chairman of Paul Weiss.
And Karp agreed on behalf of Paul Weiss to commit $40 million worth of pro bono work toward the administration's initiatives. It was very, very vague. It seems to be the case that the firms themselves thought they weren't really giving Trump anything because they would be able to say, well, these are commitments that are already in line with the way we select cases and our pro bono objectives. It seems to be that that was their hope. Since then, however, over the last week in particular, Trump has kind of been publicly taunting them by suggesting in various contexts that he may take those commitments and try to force these firms to work for the administration and things like negotiating trade deals or the Venezuelan deportations of Venezuelans, things like that. And, it's not clear how serious he is, but if he pushes that, we could be headed toward a very remarkable situation and a very awkward encounter.
Yeah, a lot of this came out in reporting last week. And it's basically, if you take all of these agreements in total, Trump seems to be thinking that he has like $1 billion war chest. So $1 billion is the collective sum that these law firms have agreed to. And the New York Times, in their reporting, they talked to one lawyer. They didn't name them, but this lawyer is directly involved in the negotiations and said that Trump's comments suggesting that he could use this as a personal legal fund, they might actually unravel these deals.
Yeah, we shall see. They might. I think it would put these firms in a very, very awkward position. Working on behalf of the federal government would create all sorts of complications, including complications with their ethical commitments to their clients, including clients that are adverse to the government. It could unravel them, but we shall see. Frankly, the one thing that we've learned from these firms, which I knew, but many people have been surprised to learn, and I understand why, is that they're pretty craven and cowardly. And they will say things like that anonymously to the New York Times, but would they ever attach their name to a statement saying, like, we're not going to do this? That's not going to happen. So that already is a bad sign. But, look, Trump likes to taunt people. When he's got them down, he likes to keep his foot on their necks. He could just be messing with them. Who knows? But I do think one of the things he's done pretty effectively is really humiliated them. And he's been not just talking about like, we're going to put this money to use for the administration, but you sort of alluded to it. He's been talking about this in very personal terms, saying, oh, they've given me this money. I've got $1 billion now that they've committed to me to use. I got this huge war chest. It's really, really quite striking. And I think it's quite humiliating for these law firms, I must say, who fancy themselves as very savvy and sophisticated litigators and negotiators. And the notion that they were going to like outmaneuver Trump this easily, I think was farcical, quite honestly. And they're the ones who are being made to look like fools at the moment.
How are the firms that gave into Trump explaining their choice? Like, how are they doing it internally? How are they doing it externally?
Internally, what they're saying is basically that they didn't really give Trump much, that the commitments they made to him were already in line with their values. That's the claim internally. And also internally that they were going to suffer a potential existential crisis. That at least is the claim that Brad Karp made internally and Paul Weiss. I don't take either of those claims particularly seriously, nor do I think all the partners, even at Paul Weiss, take those claims seriously. Externally, they have tried to keep their heads down and not say much at all and keep quiet and hope the whole thing blows over.
I mean, do you buy that argument that the firms would go out of business if they didn't sign on?
No, I do not. And I find the argument a little obnoxious. Paul Weiss is more profitable than like 99.5% of the law firms in this country. Mm-hmm. Brad Karp makes tens of millions of dollars a year. The average profit per partner at Paul Weiss, which is among the highest in the world, is $6.5 million per partner. So could they have survived like a 50% cut? Could the partners have lived off $3 million a year? I would hope so. Maybe they don't think so, but we don't have to take their claims seriously.
On the other side, there have been a few associates who have at least made news coverage when they decided to leave these firms, citing a moral stance. How widespread is this mindset within these firms at the lower level?
I think that discontent is very real and it's widespread. However, we have seen several people leave and then sort of emerge in the media, but it's a paltry number in the scheme of things. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's really happening here, the actual takeaway here is that 99.99999% of the lawyers at these firms are staying.
Given that, I'm trying to understand the existential threat here for those firms. Like, they're not worried about people leaving. They're not worried about their financial security. Are they maybe looking further into the future? Are they trying to hedge their bets like, okay, well, if Trump is out of office, we'll be in a good spot. And if Trump just keeps going, we'll always be around in some way to make money.
Well, they will always be around. You can pretty much guarantee that. Even during the financial crisis, these firms largely all survived with very little change. I think the explanation, it's a simple one and it's an unsatisfying one. I think they didn't want to make less money. I don't think the firms are going to go out of business. I don't think that there's much sort of long-term strategy. I know Brad Karp enough to know that he's the type of person who does things like this without thinking that far ahead. So I think it's greed. It's as simple as that. There was no existential crisis. You should not take him seriously. There's a reason he's been in hiding since these deals. And I expect he'll be in hiding for quite some time.
We'll be back after a quick break.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance. They'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com, Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is a great way to discover the best new styles and elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. The great thing about Saks.com is that it is always open 24 hours a day, which means you can browse from the comfort of your own home. Saks makes it really easy to find your favorite brands, and they offer amazing style inspiration. I'm not exaggerating when I say my jaw dropped at the shearling leather biker jacket I found. And that's not even mentioning the Alice and Olivia sequined mini dress I had my eye on. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation, Saks makes it fun and easy. So if you're looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and you want to elevate your personal style, head on over to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration.
Missions to Mars, driverless cars, AI chatbots. Feels like we're already living in the future. Well, Robinhood is built for the future of trading. Robinhood's intuitive design makes trading seamless. On Robinhood, traders have access to popular stocks and ETFs 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, so you can keep up with today's fast-paced markets. Spot opportunities and take control of your trades with tools like screeners, simulated returns, and strategy builder. You can now even trade your favorite assets all in one place. Robinhood offers competitive pricing with commission-free trades on stock and ETF options and some of the lowest margin rates among leading brokerages. The future of trading is fast, powerful, and precise. Experience it now on Robinhood. Sign up today. Investing is risky. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Trading during extended hours involves additional risks. Other fees may apply.
Some people have raised the question of whether or not these deals are actually legal. To understand why, Ankush says it's useful to focus in on the example of one firm.
Here's what actually happened with the deal with Brad Karp and Paul Weiss and Trump. Trump had imposed a collection of sanctions on Paul Weiss, including, for instance, that he had pulled all the security clearances for anyone at the firm that held those clearances. Once that happened, Brad Karp went in and, according to the reporting, came up with this proposal to offer Trump this pro bono work at this sort of value, $40 million. I don't know how they came up with the number, but that this was a framework that sort of Karp had come up with and pursued himself to try to get a quick deal with the White House. Now, ordinarily, when someone pays a government official to undertake an official act, which would be, for instance, giving back security clearances, we would call that bribery under federal law or extortion, because someone is paying a government official to undertake an official act to benefit them. Now, it does not matter that the money that was paid by the firms went to a third party rather than Trump, although Trump characterizes them as payments to him anyway. And also, if someone in this sort of setting is the quote unquote victim, but they came up with the idea to engage in this transaction, they can have exposure under federal criminal law for conspiring to engage in extortion and aiding and abetting extortion, even though they are the quote unquote victim. Now, you might be wondering, why is that a good rule? Like, that seems kind of unfair to the victim. Well, the best reason is because you want to make sure that more people don't follow suit and engage in the same corrupt practice. And the other thing I would just say before we can go down further is I think it's useful to think about like how we would interpret these events if we read about them going on in another country. If foreign correspondents were reporting about the wealthiest lawyers in some Eastern European country going to the president, offering up tens of millions of dollars in concessions in order to remain on the government's good side, we would call that state-sanctioned bribery and extortion. We would not be mincing words about it.
One thing that's striking me from this whole conversation since the start, the law firms are worrying about trying to keep their bottom line solvent, right? They're trying to figure out how to do business in this landscape, regardless of who's in charge. But my understanding is that a lot of these firms are going to be hired by people who have to do work in front of the government, against the government. And so my question is, in the future, for these firms that are deciding to make these agreements, how are they hoping to attract clients that might have business in front of the government if they've already shown a willingness to sort of give up as soon as the government tells them to?
Look, here's what their best spin, I think, and what I think even the clients would, in many senses, understand, which is that when you're a large company, and these places work for large companies, you often are facing the government. Sometimes you're facing unfair allegations, but the question of how you resolve those allegations, whether you fight or not fight, is a sensitive one. It's one about risk tolerance. It's one about how you assess the merits and the probabilities and the financial exposure. And, these firms advise clients to settle matters, including with the federal government, quite regularly and negotiate settlements like that. Sometimes the advice is to take it to court for various reasons. Often the advice is to settle it if you have the opportunity. And this all quite resembles how white-collar regulatory investigations work in practice. And I think it's no accident that these things have unfolded in that way, and that they've unfolded that way in large part because the firms handle that type of business.
And if you take it a step further, I think that people that are worried about allowing this to continue, they're imagining some pretty big changes to law, to big law as a practice. Are there parties in the future that might have trouble finding representation? Do firms step back from pro bono work entirely? Like, what are the bigger ramifications here?
Yeah, I mean, look, the clients that they work for are the largest interests in the country, right? I think there are partners now who bill up to $3,000 an hour. The average billable rate is like $1,000 an hour. You and I could not afford these firms if we needed them, right? People like you and me and the people who are listening, we go to the 99% of other firms, regional firms, smaller local practitioners for our legal needs. So when we're thinking about like the impact of these deals on the legal profession kind of writ large, I do think it's sort of concentrated to these elite firms, quote unquote elite firms, and their client base, and that at least for paying work, this isn't going to affect the average person because the average person doesn't have access to these law firms anyway. Now, I do think on the pro bono side, we could see some effects, but let me just underscore again, these firms do less pro bono work than they like to portray themselves as doing. What they do is very valuable, it is laudable, but it is a very small part of what they do. I do think potentially we may see the firms slightly deterred from litigating against the Trump administration, although I think that effect was already somewhat in place. And I don't think Paul Weiss had been doing any of this pro bono litigation against Trump on the executive orders, whereas other firms had the ACLU and Democracy Forward are pursuing those cases and other nonprofits. I do think there could be a pretty tangible impact on pro bono representation for asylum cases, for migrants who are applying for assignment, because law firms do actually do a fair amount of work on that front because they're pretty good ways for junior associates to get experience litigating, and the firms kind of use them that way. And I think there could be a chilling effect in that area.
So 9 of these big firms have agreements with the Trump administration, but there are a few that have notably decided to fight back. How is that going for them?
It's going well so far. I mean, they've managed to secure preliminary injunctions pretty early on. Those are not final determinations, but, they're prevailing in the lower courts. And, in terms of the business, at least outwardly, they're sort of putting on a pretty brave face. There has been some reporting. I think Perkins Coie itself has acknowledged that they've lost a fair amount of revenue as a result of the order. But for the most part, at least in the courts, they're faring pretty well so far.
Have they lost any of their big clients? It's my understanding that places like Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, they're all sticking with Perkins so far.
It does seem to be the case that these companies, at least the big clients, have been sticking with them. And I'm not surprised by that, to be honest. I think to some extent, the clients are general counsels at these firms. They're lawyers too. So the lawyers who hire these firms, they understand these issues too. So my suspicion is that the general counsels of a lot of these places are themselves quite concerned. Actually, it's not even really a suspicion. A bunch of them, former general counsels, have put in amicus briefs of their own opposing these deals in pretty strong terms. And these are former general counsels from very, very large companies. And my strong suspicion is that the current general counsels from a lot of large companies also share the view that these deals are quite problematic and that they don't want to aid and abet the destruction of these firms.
Ankush, thank you so much for your time. I'm very grateful to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Ankush Khardori is a senior writer at Politico magazine and a former federal prosecutor in the U.S. Justice Department. Before that, he worked as an attorney at Paul Weiss. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Rob Gunther, in for Mary Harris. You can find me on Blue Sky. I'm at @OneRobGunther. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.